This is Between the Uprights. Football is life. The rest is just details. Here are your hosts, Joe, Matt, and Chris.
Welcome into Between the Uprights. I'm Joe, that's Matt. Chris couldn't be here with us today, but our thoughts go out to her as she's working her way back from an illness. But that doesn't mean we're not going to be here giving you all of that great football breakdown that you come to Between the Uprights for. Before we get into all that, please hit that like and subscribe button. It would mean a lot to us here at Between the Uprights. We're just getting this thing rolling here, and we would appreciate if you were to like and subscribe. Now, the 49ers have a clear issue, and that issue is that they're 2-3 after a Super Bowl run last year. The defense, although ranked highly and rated highly per PFF as well, they're a top 10 defense, has two major issues. Both are correctable. I believe both are correctable. Both are kind of injury kind of concerns here and there. I think they're going to shore those up. It's tackling, which defensive coordinators hate when you can't tackle, and run defense. Those are the two Achilles heels right now of the San Francisco 49ers. Now, early on, I had concerns that Brandon Staley was the reason this was a problem. We were not fond here Between the Uprights that Brandon Staley was part of the 49ers coaching staff.
Is anybody fond of having Brandon Staley on their coaching staff? I don't know if anybody is at this point.
Probably not. I think that the Chargers, if a Chargers fan watches this video, they're immediately going to have PTSD.
Get nauseous.
Like, they just remember all the bad times. I mean, I'd vomit. If I was a Chargers fan and someone mentioned Brandon Staley in my ear range, somewhere where I could hear them, I would
yeah, right away. Right away.
Right away. It's a bad time. That is a dark, dark time in Chargers history, man. Like, for real. So they are right now very fixable. But it is concerning that you start to see these things. And, you think about who they've beaten. They beat a Jets team who their starting quarterback hasn't looked good, hadn't played a single snap since 2023 in game one, 42 seconds into it. And so that team wasn't ready to go. They blew them out of the water. They then lose to the Vikings, who, granted, look like a NFC contender right now. They're the only undefeated team in the NFC, and they've been doing so on the arm of Sam Darnold, who has looked fantastic. Yep. They lose to the Rams, who really haven't looked good. And if you outside of that game, and in fact are 1-4 right now, where their only win is against the 49ers. Yep. They then beat a hapless Patriots team handily at home. And then they get a back-to-back at home where the Cardinals come in, division rival, and beat them 24-23. So you're losing close games. I think every single one of their losses is a one-score game. They lost 23-17. That's 6 points. They lost 27-24. That's 3 points. And they lost 24-23. That's 2 points. The problem is that two of their three losses are in the division. Mm-hmm. So right now, you're losing any tiebreakers going forward. And, I guess the best news is that Arizona and Seattle really haven't separated themselves right now. And you're kind of wondering how that's going to work and how this division is going to shake out. They're tied for second right now. The only reason they're in the third in the division is because they lost the head-to-head to the Cardinals. But they got the Seahawks in Seattle. They lose that game, they are in dire straits. 1-3 in the division is not where you want to go, and their schedule doesn't really get any easier. They get the Chiefs right after the Seahawks. Then they have the Cowboys team, who seems to have found their way to right the ship a little bit here after they won here in Week 5. Still, the jury's out on that. I don't think they should have signed Dak. I think that was a waste of money. But that's a conversation for a different video. Then you get the Bucks. Then you get the Seahawks again. Then you get the Packers and the Bills on the road, followed by the Bears, who are playing really good football right now. You get the Rams again, and then you finish out the season, Dolphins, who should be a win unless Tua comes back. Then you get the Lions, and then you get the Cardinals again in Arizona. There are not a lot of winnable games. This was not a start that the 49ers could afford, and now we're going to go from possibly them representing the NFC to, if things don't turn around from a tackling and run defense standpoint, And if they keep losing these one-score games, they have a lot of playoff caliber teams on their schedule right now. And it is looking pretty bleak unless they turn this around. And so, Matt, I'm going to ask you, are they faltering? Is this them crumbling right now from a defensive standpoint? Even though they're top 10 in a lot of these categories, this is not looking good.
It's not looking good at all. And you just talked about the schedule. That was actually going to be the last thing that I talked about, but that's going to be the first thing that I talk about now because you just talked about it. They're playing Seattle this week. It's a short week at Seattle, which everyone knows is one of the hardest places to play in the NFL. And it's on Thursday Night Football. So we're going to get a good one on Thursday night. It might be good for the fans. It's not good for the Niners because they're real banged up. You talked about it. That's the next thing I'm going to get into, but they're real banged up. And you're playing a Seahawks team who's coming off a tough loss to the Giants. They're going to be motivated. They're going to want to get a win. So if you go, obviously you start 0-3 in the division and you're 2-4 and you're 2 games behind the Seahawks. That's a tough place to be. And then you said it. You talked about the schedule. Home to Kansas City, home to Dallas. Like you went through the whole schedule. How many winnable games or how many like for sure guaranteed wins are on the rest of their schedule? I don't even think there's one because I think Tua is going to be back for that at Dolphins game, So again, that's going to be a tough game there. The next Rams game, they're going to have Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp back more than likely, So that's going to be a tough one. Obviously, you talked about the Bears at home. The Bears have one of the best defenses in football. They're a really good team. Caleb Williams is starting to play better. So obviously at Arizona, you just lost to Arizona. So at Arizona is not going to be any easier than home to Arizona. So, I mean, there's not a whole lot of 100% wins left on that schedule. Again, they're going to win plenty of those games because they're a really talented football team and they're, a well-coached team and they've got a good quarterback. Their offensive line has been top 10 so far this year. They've been really good offensive line. They've got a ton of weapons. They've got the pieces on defense, obviously. So they're going to win a lot of games, but there's definitely some things to think about as far as the Niners go and if they can really make a run. But obviously the number one reason for their problems, I think, for me so far in this season is the injuries. It's part of football. I get it, but Christian McCaffrey is their best player, and he hasn't played yet. Jordan Mason's been good, especially as a runner, but he does not have CMC's pass game impact. What CMC does in the pass game is unmatched as far as running backs goes. He was a 1,000 guy. 1,000 rushing, 1,000 receiving when he was in Carolina, and he basically scores a touchdown every game. So CMC is a huge, huge loss. Obviously, Drake Greenlaw hasn't played yet either for that defense at linebacker. And he's an absolute beast as far as linebackers go. Obviously, his injury last year in the Super Bowl was a tragic one. Literally just getting onto the field, he tears his Achilles. That's a tough one to watch. But they're missing him. Obviously, Javon Hargrave, he's out for the year as well. Kittle and Debo have both missed a game each. Hufunga's missed 3 games. And their loss Sunday, I'm not going to overreact to their loss Sunday because Jake Moody got hurt. And they were in field goal range in the second half, but they had to go for it on 4th and 23 from the Cardinals' 27-yard line at the end of the third quarter. That's an obvious normal field goal. That's a 44-yard field goal. Like, it's an obvious field goal situation. But they had to go for it on 4th and 23 because their kicker was hurt. And then, obviously, you lose by 1. Those are 3 huge points that you didn't have. So, obviously, and then the 2 self-inflicted, I think the next reason I would give for the Niners not being where they're at is the self-inflicted wounds. Obviously Jordan Mason has that fumble on 1st and goal from the 8-yard line with 6 minutes left to go in the game. That's 7 points there. If Mason's, if Mason just gets into the end zone, or if Moody's healthy, you just get 3 points there. So obviously Brock throws the batted pick early in the game, and then the one he got hit on the last drive. So turnovers have been an issue for the season. Their turnover differential is 0. So obviously they're kind of even. They've turned the ball over as much as they've got turnovers on defense. So they're middle of the pack in football, but I think they have to start winning that turnover battle a lot more if they want to be good. Obviously, you talked about it, Joe. The defense is still hovering around top 10, but it's not that top 5, number 1 defense that we're used to the San Francisco 49ers having. They're 10th in total yards, 9th in rushing, 11th in passing, 13th in points, and 9th in sacks. But that's not, like I said, that's not really what you expect from a unit that's this talented, especially sacks, given how much they've invested in that defensive line. You expect them to be easily top 5 in sacks, if not top 2 or 3, with how much they've invested. And then the 4th reason I'll give for their struggles is the distractions in the wild offseason. Brandon Ayuk contract situation lingered until, a week before the season. And then he had a bad first 4 weeks. Obviously, he played well yesterday against Arizona. That's a good sign. But Trent Williams obviously had a contract situation linger until a week before the season as well. And then Ricky Pearsall literally got shot a week before the season, and he's been out this entire time too. So I think the off season, having a crazy off season and all of this, it can obviously be attributed to struggles for the 49ers as well. But it's something they can turn around. I think there's a lot to be concerned about, but I think this team is too talented for them not to at least start rattling off some wins and get to, I think it's possible. I wouldn't be surprised if we're looking up week 18 and they're 8-8 and they're fighting for a playoff spot. I think that's definitely on the board. But if I had to bet, I'm betting on them, 10, 11 games and making the playoffs.
I mean, I want to agree with you. It's just hard for me too because, CMC may not come back. The more and more this season goes along, the more and more we hear that it's this and it's that and it's things compounding and he's not coming back, right? And then you already know that, Hargraves isn't coming back. You look at some of their defensive and if Hargraves is anchoring that defensive line, they're one of the best run defenses in the league. Without him, they're one of the worst run defenses in the league. I think right now, as a run defense, they're 8th worst in the NFL as a run defense, according to PFF. Their tackling is even worse, where they're, you look at that and they're 10th in tackling right now. So, they're not tackling well. They're not stopping the run very well. I mean, even the Patriots, who only can run the football, they're running the football, ran the football effectively against them. So even when they know it's coming, they can't stop it. So there is a clear problem right now in the center of that defense in the front seven that they have to address. And I look for the 49ers to make some trades. I think that if they want to get back to being viable, they have to find someone somewhere to trade with. And, you look at, Devon Godchow over there in New England, who, they're pretty much, writing their season off right now. I don't think the Drake May starting in week 6 is going to do anything for them. He could be available. He's relatively cheap to get right now. I think he's got this is the last year on his contract. They may have to check into that. But there are guys out there that are available that could fill that hole, that are really good run defenders and still get a decent amount of, hold their gap, can really play contain, and still can get a little bit of pressure and push in the center. No one's Javon Hargraves, but you need to go find somebody right now, because if your run defense is this bad, it won't matter if you make the playoffs. You're one and done. You look at some of these other teams that, you look at the Vikings right now, who are going to have a good run game. The Saints could be a playoff team. The Washington Commanders have a 3-headed monster with Jaden Daniels, Brian Robinson, Austin Eckler, and McNichols, right? That's a 4-headed monster, right? So they're killing it right now. You are going to run into teams in the NFC that are going to be able to run the football, especially in December and January. And if you can't stop the run, it doesn't matter what the rest of your defense looks like or how many other offensive weapons you get back. You are going to lose. Mm-hmm. Not to mention, like you said, Jake Moody's out. He's hurt. And my thing is we have seen corners, we have seen safeties, we have seen guys come in and kick a football. Chad Ochocinco kicked a football. Wes Welker has kicked a football for a fucking field goal here, all right? You're telling me no one else on that 49ers team has the confidence to go out there? And is it a worse situation if you go out there as the player and you miss the field goal than it is if you don't get it on 4th and 3? I'm sure the percentages say 4th and 3 is probably easier than having someone who's not a professional kicker go out there and kick a field goal. But from 37 yards, 42 at max, you're telling me that's a less comparable option? That's a less factual way to go. I just don't understand. I think that you look at those situations, I mean, granted, it's early in the season, right? You're testing some things out, but you don't have that luxury, looking at the 49ers schedule, to go out there and leave points on the table right now. As a 2-win team, the only teams you've beaten honestly aren't going anywhere this year. And one of them is probably going to end up with the number 1 overall draft pick. That's one of your 2 wins. So you're beating non-playoff caliber teams and losing to playoff caliber teams right now. That's what's happening. So I'm a little concerned because I don't know, outside of, a trade, and I don't know what they're willing to give up or if they can even absorb another contract right now with how their payroll situation is. And how that's going to work, because no one's going to give up a playoff caliber defensive tackle on the cheap. You're going to have to go out there and find a diamond in the rough who you think can fit your system on a team that's not a playoff caliber team and hope they're willing to give them up. And that's the only way that you're going to get it. And I just don't know if they can. But, I mean, then again, like I said, it's week 6. We're a third of the way through the season. after this weekend. If they're 2-4, that puts them behind the 8 ball a little bit more, but we're going to have to wait and see if the 49ers can right the ship, or if this is just another chapter in what has been a messy first 6 weeks of the NFL season for the 49ers.
This has been Between the Uprights. Football is life. The rest is just details.